Welcome back to our study on the house of Ahab. I'm Dick Baker, your teacher. I'm glad to have you with us today. We are going to be looking at something special, and it is all about King Ahab's building project at Hazor. As we read scripture, most of our attention is on Ahab and Jezebel, Elijah, Elisha, other individuals around them, and we're looking at people and battles and great sins. Most do not know that King Ahab was a builder, and he had a lot of projects going on, and he did a lot of things. So I'm going to share one of them with you today, and most importantly, want to share the history behind it. So we'll take a few minutes on the history of Hazor. When was it founded? Who lived there? What happened there ahead of Ahab? There's some pretty interesting folks that have come this city's way. You can see where it is on the map. And if you look down and you can see Samaria, the city, that's the capital. That's where Ahab and Jezebel reign out of. So we're going to take a look in the Bible and see where it came from. In the 800s BC, and we're clearing Abraham by about 200 years. The city was established in both upper and lower cities. So it was built on a hill, but there were levels. That is referenced in Egyptian texts. It is mentioned in the text of Mari, which deals with the Euphrates River and Mesopotamia. And there are some of those Egyptian pieces. In the 1500s BC, it's mentioned in the Amarna letters. That's a 14th century BC Egyptian archive of clay tablets. Now, you might wonder, say, what's the Egyptians doing this? What is going on? Keep in mind that most of these cities were on a trade route. And they would come down through these areas. They would have something to do with them. Also, Egypt spent a lot of time over here. There were a lot of battles fought by the Egyptians. And so what they had here was correspondence between Hazor's king and the pharaoh. Once again, there's another one of those pieces of clay that they wrote on. In the 1300s before Christ, the city was destroyed and was found in excavations. Joshua and the Israelites, and this might tell you why it was destroyed, Joshua and the Israelites were conquering the land at this time, and Hazor was one of those cities. And from 1249 to 1209, Judges chapter 4 and 5, that's where they about are dated. The upper city was rebuilt, but the lower was not settled again at this point. A battle led by Sisera against Deborah and Barak is won by the Israelites by and near Mount Tabor and the Jezreel Valley. And so you can see the Israelites in red. Initially, if you look at the battlefield, that's the structure. In blue was Sisera's army, and he was immense in chariots. And so they were ready to send in the chariot brigade up front to do the initial dirty work, followed by the foot soldiers who would do the cleanup of what was left. And Israel did not have chariots at this point. So they were at a disadvantage as far as the world is concerned in Sisera, but God was on their side. What happened? This battle was going to take place on dried marshland, and it rained through the night. And what happened? The next day, the chariots got stuck in the mud. They couldn't do anything, couldn't go anywhere. So the Israelite army put them to flight. They beat them. What you can see is they came from the east on the right-hand side of our picture, and a majority of them ran back towards the east, but Sisera and some others were over on the west side, and they took off and were running that way, and that's where Deborah caught up to them and killed Sisera. In 1134 to 1096, still in the book of Judges, chapter 11, there was a Canaanite coalition led by Hazor's king Jabin. Now, all of a sudden, we're getting names, and he is defeated by the Israelites. Hazor is burned, and the Israelites take the city again. Still in the 900s, we're now in Kings. There's a new gate and walls are built by the Israelites. This was done by King Solomon and ordered by him. So now we're in the area that we're familiar with. Here's a scripture, and this is the reason of the levy of the taxes which King Solomon raised, for to build the house of the Lord and his own house, and Milo, and the wall of Jerusalem, and Hazor, and Megiddo, and Gezer. So this, he raised taxes just to do these things and to fortify them and to make them strong once again. So I can already start to show you occasionally some of the archaeological finds at Hazor that if you went there now, you'd see this. This is the chamber gate at Hazor. What a chamber gate was, there is a gate that would be there and that it would open, but it would open into an inner area, and each of these little slits or these little rooms, they would house soldiers. Not that they would sleep there, but those were sort of compartments, and the enemy would try to come through the gate. They'd have to come at one or two abreast. They couldn't get in there, and what would happen? These soldiers would kill them off if they had breached that area. And so it was a very secure area, and as bodies mounted up, soldiers, it was starting to get clogged up, and it was a little harder to get through. And so they would vacate that, and many times would just retreat and go back and find another way. King Ahab in 879 expands the city. He digs the water system. He adds a citadel, storehouses, and public buildings. Wow. Told you he was a builder, and here's that time slot. Keep in mind, he co-reigned with his dad, Omri, for a few years. That's why there's a difference in the year of his actual reigning. So he was already out among people, letting himself be known, which is not a bad idea if you're the king in waiting. 901, Syria's Ben-Hadad marches along the northern Jordan Valley and gives damages to Hazor. Do you remember way back when King Asa was on the throne in Judah? And what happened was Baasha, the king of the northern kingdom, came across the northern border and started to fortify cities. He took the border cities. He was in Judah, the southern kingdom's land, and Asa said, I've got some help, need some help here now. So he sent messengers up to Syria to Ben-Hadad and with money and paid him to attack these northern cities. And what happened was Baasha abandoned all of that construction to go north to help defend the nation. And he never came back down that far again. So what happened, he left all the materials, and Baasha had them just say, hey, let's go ahead and let's fortify our cities with this stuff, which was a great idea. And there's where it talks about the cities that he called his attention to and some others. The invasion of Shalmaneser III marks the first Assyrian expedition. There's damages to Hazor in 841, 815 to 10, the invasion of Syria's king Hazael, and we'll be looking at him. Once again, the city's damaged but not wiped out. Tiglath-Pileser III was an invasion. The city's totally destroyed. He's an Assyrian king. In the Bible, it usually has him just listed as Pol, P-O-L. You can read about him there. So we're sort of watching things drop down until we get to the present. In the days of Pekah, king, and Pekah is one of the last kings of Israel, came Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, and took Ijon and Abel Beth Maachah and Genoa and Kadesh and Hazor and Gilead and Galilee, all the land of Naphtali, and carried them captive to Assyria, just took them away. All right, let's look at Hazor now. We've looked at the past heavily, and let's bring the past to the present. Okay, this is one of the largest tells, or hill. Archaeologists calls the hills tells. And I don't know why. My first thought was that the hill tells a story. And the way archaeology used to work was if you're looking for a city, you investigate, read scriptures, other things that were written during that time or after it, and even talk to people that have lived there a while. Maybe their ancestors go back a while and word was exchanged, and say, look, there's 3 hills right here. Which one has the city buried underneath of it? So that's how they would dig. Then they'd go digging. Known as Joshua's day as the head of all those kingdoms, the tell Hazor is today the largest in Israel at 200 acres. So on top of this hill, 200 acres is a good bit of land, and it is the largest of Israel. At its height in the Canaanite period, the city encompassed the entire top. They'd build it up and then walled it, of course. Later, when it was inhabited by Israelites, the fortified city included only the upper city. And I think maybe you can see the lower cities being pointed to, and then to the left is the upper area. And the upper area seems to have more archaeological things, buildings, and the lower city doesn't seem to have a whole lot showing us at this point. Solomon's Gate. Archaeologists have uncovered a 6-chamber gate at Hazor, which is nearly identical in size and design to the gates at Megiddo and Gezer. Well, if you have blueprints and you're building 6-chambered gates at cities, make copies and build the ones that are the same. The best explanation for this is that these gates were all built by the same government. The gates are a remarkable testimony to Solomon's building activity, and you can read about that in 1 Kings 9. Now this is Hazor today. You can see it's pretty well dug up and revealed. Here's a picture of that again. There's a Canaanite building. Some of the most impressive remains from Hazor date back to when the Canaanites lived there. Many structures in the lower city were cultic structures and included religious figurines or standing stones. Religious figurines would generally be called pocket idols, and they weren't of the Lord. So usually a Baal and Ashtoreth would have been the main choices. Marduk would be a third one. Standing stones were stones that were set up on end, and they were tall, and some of them could be 10, 15 feet high. And they are still standing all over Israel today. And what they generally would do is they would stand them up and stand another, and then they'd drop one over the top. And they'd create an altar to their god. There's some standing stones there. Storehouse and a stable. This type of building, better known as an Israelite tripartite pillared building, has been found at numerous sites throughout the country. Again, if you have to have blueprints, if you're the same builder, why try to create something different. You already got the plans. Many functions for this type of structure have been suggested. Some archaeologists believe that these were used for the storage of food, more likely. And the primary function of this building was for the housing of the royal cavalry. Okay, now here's the four-room house, and this is interesting. This popular building style would be better known as a pillared house than by the number of rooms in it. They are found throughout Israel, everywhere. From the time of the settlement of the Israelites, the number of rooms in the dwelling may vary, but always it's characterized by a row or two of pillars separating the central court from the side room. So if you take a look at this, these pillars, and of course then you'd put blankets over them or whatever to designate rooms. They were walled and they had a ceiling and or a roof over them. The walls would divide areas up, so you could have a four-roomed house. Now the water system, and this what brings us to here, and we're going to pick it up with Ahab and something that he did. Century after Solomon's time, the Israelites built a massive shaft, 130 feet deep, and down into the hill, straight down, reaching the water table below. The 62 feet vertical shaft was about 49 feet square, and it ended at a wide sloping stepped tunnel that led 82 more feet. This system is similar to those at Megiddo and Gibeon, and we'll come to Megiddo at another time. We're going to look at this real quick after this slide. After the 9th century BC, the city expanded and added an impressive water system, probably under King Ahab's rule. It's almost certain, to assure water access within the walls during a siege. It had a rectangular shaft about 60 feet deep that connected to a tunnel with a series of stairs another 90 feet down to the spring. So keep in mind, if this was 130 feet they dug down to get the water, that's like 13 stories of building. That's just incredible. So here it is today, and if you go to Hazor, you can go here. And you can see, first of all, you can see the winding steps going down that are made for tourism and for workers. And you also can see over to the dead center lower right, you can see the walk ramp and then the steps going down at an angle. Now I'm showing you you can see the circular ones right there on the right to go down, but these are the original ones. And this is the one they talked about at an angle that they built these. This would have come in under, this would have been done by Ahab as he was just building projects. And they built this down, it would stop there, would turn, and then it'd go down, you'd turn right, and then you'd come back the other way, like escalators in a department store. The water system of Hazor dates to approximately the same time as that as Megiddo, but it's different in one respect. The Israelites sunk a shaft nearly 100 feet through the tell, but instead of building a tunnel to a water source outside the city, that's what they did at Megiddo, they built a stepped passageway that led 70 feet further down into the bedrock below the city. So what they were doing, here the ancient engineers found the water table and fresh water within the city walls. So at Megiddo, this secretly went down underneath the outer city wall at an angle out to springs and to like a giant pond that was out there. So to get the water, you left the city and not far, but you kept going at an angle. And then you'd come back in, right? But that was at Megiddo. At Hazor, it was straight down. They never had to worry about invaders coming from the outside fighting their water source. So once again, you can see now, of course, the arm railing has been added, but here you are at the angular. And one of the big issues with that is you had your own water source, but the water table came up, and also because of it just being a tunnel can be damp, that the stairs got slippery. So it was really, really, really difficult to navigate things. All right, and so this is who's responsible for this. This would be Ahab, and he did this in other cities. We're going to look at Megiddo in a bit. It'll be a few weeks before we're there. And so, as you can see, the people descended into the shaft on stairs around the outside, some which can be seen today. They're worn smooth by the feet of thousands of nameless Israelites. The stairs were wet. Drawing water probably became dangerous. And one of the wonders how many injuries or fatalities occurred as a result of this. The rock walls above kept the walls of the shaft from collapsing into the tunnel below. Hence, we have the guardrails. All right. I want to thank you so much for tuning in today on this. This is sort of a special adventure, and we'll be having them all throughout this Bible study. So sort of just watch for them. They're added right into the teaching. And may God bless you. This is where you can find me. If I can help you in any way, there's my email address. So I'll see you for our next Bible study, because that's up next. And then we'll be back into getting into tunnels and city walls from bygone eras.